that was the best analogy you could give. Even it's like, you weren't Superman. What are you on about? Why are you comparing yourself, to a guy in a red jocks and a cape? But that's the way it felt.
I don't know who you are, but welcome to the Irish Photography Podcast. Sit back, relax, and listen about cameras, gear, settings, stories, and all things photography. Join Darren on Ireland's Best Photography Podcast. Let's go.
You're very welcome to episode 145 of the Irish Photography Podcast. My name is Darren, I'm your host, and I'm joined by somebody who I've listened to for many, many years, and I'm delighted to have him on the podcast now, on the other side of the mic, for me to throw the questions at him. So, somebody who I think a lot of people would know, Mr. Victor Barry, Vic Barry. Welcome to the Irish Photography Podcast.
Hey, Darren, thanks for having me. How are you getting on?
Marvellous, boy, marvellous. Thanks a million for coming on. Like I alluded to, I've been listening to you for years, man. So, it is a strange one now for me to throw the questions at you. How's things with you this evening, anyway?
Very good, very good, very good. Kids are about to go to bed or gone to bed. So life is good. Wife has gone out. So, yeah, I can't complain.
I'm the same as that now. My wife is still here, but the kids have just gone to bed. So I get a small bit of peace and quiet that we can record, hopefully in peace anyway. So, like I said, look, I alluded to it. I suppose I've listened to you for a long period of time. So in case anybody doesn't know who is Vic Barry, tell us, who are you?
For me, I suppose most people probably know me from Red FM and the radio. And that's where I came to, if you want to loosely call the word fame, I guess, in some scenario. So I spent 11 years in Red FM as the talk show host there, both at night, and then a couple of rocket scientists decided this guy would be great in the morning as well. And that was kind of the bulk of it, really. But for me, it's always been video and photography. I've had a camera in my hand since I can't even remember at this stage. For absolute years and years and years, and I'm talking, going back there, you'd be going to the Roman House down the North Main Street to get your couple of to get your rolls of film developed, or Alan there from the Roman House, or was it his parents' family owned it or whatever? They were involved. They had another spot there on Patrick Street. The Photoshop, I think that's still there. So you just drop in rolls of film from this Canon Ixus that I had, and wow. I was just buying. All I was doing was buying. Was it 36 rolls of? You get 36 shots. And it was just constantly going in there. 36 photos developed. One of them was any good. It was. Yeah, and I remember, and I still have it here. Actually, I don't think. I have to pull the whole place down now, Darren, over. But anyway,
that's all right. That's allowed.
This is one of the first digital cameras I had, actually. This was a Canon PowerShot A40. And then there's another thing up here, which was a Sony CyberShot. What's the model on this thing? I'm holding it up to the camera because nobody can, because we're on the audio side of things. But this was a very early 6 megapixels. Was a CyberShot. Wow. I'm not sure of the model number. And yeah, so like this has been with me for nearly 20 years. Took AA batteries that lasted. They lasted enough for photos. But anyway, so look, I'm off on a tangent already. But so that's how I've kind of come to prominence. I've always been making videos and stuff like that, and I've done lots of other things. And so that's who Victor Barry is. That has not answered the question in any capacity.
That's all right.
Except just play out my ego, but yeah, that's about it.
don't worry. I'm going to get into it anyway as well. I'm going to get into the nuts and bolts, I suppose, as we go on with it. And it's interesting, immediately you start saying that you get a camera in your hand. I'm similar to that. As far as I can remember, I've always had a camera in my hand. I wasn't very good. I didn't know how to use it, but I always had a camera in my hand. And at least that was something that, from a very young age, I was kind of going, right, maybe I like this, maybe I didn't. And then when I got my films developed, it's funny you say Roman House, man. That brings back blasts from the past.
Yeah.
Go down to North Main Street, and I always remember walking past and you see the jewellery in the front of the window and the revolving things around it. And I was always fascinated as a young kid, and I go down with my mom, and then I started getting into the camera side of things, and that's exactly where I got my first roll of film developed in the Roman House. So, geez, that's a blast from the past. Jeez, yeah. So
I can still smell the place. It had this unique, lovely, like gorgeous smell. I don't know what it was. It was like new or clean or something, but yeah, it's still burned into my mind.
And right next door was Leaders if you wanted to have a different smell of old fabrics.
Yeah. Myself and Darren totally not showing our ages. Sure, look,
No, not showing our ages at all.
that
So
was
come
only
here.
3 years ago.
I know, I think 3 years ago. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It was a Thursday evening. I remember actually it was my favorite day to go in there. I'm only joking. So you talk in relation to having the camera and such like that, right? And I think, I've seen you in recent years, and we'll really get into the nuts and bolts about this from the tech point of view. But
Mhm.
you started off working, I believe, in a video game store. Is that where your love of tech came from?
Um, no. So that part is true. I did work in game on 66 Patrick Street. I still even remember the number 021-278-182, and we used to have this ridiculous line that we'd have to rattle off. Hello Game Cork. Have you signed up for a rewards card? Blah, or whatever crap they used to make us horse into the phone. Um, so no, like I would have been a big gamer for a long time, but my whole love of tech came ultimately from my dad.
Right.
So, he would have been the one that would have brought home a console. He would have been the one that would have bought Betamax, VHS,
Hmm. Hmm.
that kind of thing. And then for my 8th birthday, I got a Spectrum 48K,
Oh
and
yeah.
that was kind of it. So that really kind of started the love affair with technology. And unfortunately, it hasn't stopped, much beknownst to my bank balance. Um, but it's just one of those things that it's not for everybody. Um, Nobody wants to be buying a brand new phone every year or a
True.
camera, this, that, and the other. But the way I look at it, you could spend your money on worse. You know,
Very, very true. Very, very. It's harmless fun. I mean, you could be in the pub every Saturday watching United and fall out of the place and not remember you watched the game, and the money has
yeah,
gone down the toilet. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
So, and you talk about different gaming consoles. It's interesting you say it there. I mean, the ZX Spectrum was one of the ones, but I remember when I was a kid, I had an Atari, with the
2600.
slot-in
That was one of the
cartridges, the
yeah,
slot-in
that was one of the
cartridges
first
with
consoles we had.
yeah. And I always loved games as well. So, it's interesting that you worked in game because I remember when that store opened, I used to work in Partick Street, I used to work in the Vineyard Bar and
Oh, okay.
game opened and I was like, yeah, man, I can't wait for this. This is going to be class. And I went over there and I couldn't get over the array of games. I was like, because inside it was Tomorrow's World that was inside in the Queen's Old Castle. That was the only place that was selling the games before game arrived.
Yeah,
So now we're going
yeah.
over
Like,
the
well,
nostalgia now, aren't we?
complete, like a very very quick another tangent from Vic relating to game. When I worked inside there, my current wife, my wife, um, came in there one day, unbeknownst to me, like who she was or anything, and she always remembered that she dealt me, and she thought I was a complete a hole because she said, "Oh, well, let's work on my computer," and just because I happened to ask a question, what are the specs? What
Right.
is it? Whatever Windows 95 or whatever it was. And anyway, yeah, years later, you know, because I met her when I was in game, but towards the end of when I was there, she goes, "I met you a year ago here, and you were an absolute." And I was like, "All right, okay." Anyway, no shift tonight, no.
So she remembered you. You must have made a much bad impression, but in fairness, you got
I
over it, I
probably
imagine.
yeah, story of my life, bad impressions.
Well, I hope we'll make a great impression this evening because, like I said,
Fingers crossed.
uh, fingers crossed. Yeah, we're early days yet. You've survived only the first couple of minutes. What are we? We're 9 minutes in, Vic. We're flying it by. We're flying it. So talk in relation to technology and stuff like that. I mean, cameras. As you've really made cameras a part of your life, I think. Anyway, right now, and technology is part of your life right now. But I want to go back before I really get into that detail. We kind of
Hmm.
mentioned it in the intro, and you kind of mentioned as well introducing yourself. So I listened to you on Red FM. Cork Talks Back with Victor Barry. Tell me, how did all that start, man? How did you get involved in radio? Like,
I asked myself that question countless times when I was there. To cut a long story short, funnily enough, all of this goes back to when I started in game.
right?
There was one of my best friends happened to work in the shop not long after I started. He got a part-time job there, and as time went on, he said, "Look, he was in college. He was on campus radio. Uh, was it 97.4, whatever it was at the time?" And he said,
Hmm.
"Look, I'm doing a computer segment called Bite Me. So Byte with a BYTE.
Right.
He goes, "Do you want to come up and do a video game segment some night?" I was like, yeah, I'd be like Howard Stern kind of thing, because I loved Howard Stern back in the day.
Yeah.
And I had zero aspirations of ever getting into radio. So I rocked up there one Tuesday night, did it, and then it became a regular thing. So we'd go up there every Tuesday evening at 7:00 and just put out this live, on a campus college radio station, which don't know how many listeners they had. I don't think there was much. And then he left eventually. I think he just left college, and Kieran, who was the program manager at the time up there, said, "Look, do you want to continue, and do you want to do this?" I was like, "Geez, yeah, I'll do it." Like, and it was a 30-minute show at the time. And then what I did is I pitched them with the advent of the internet. I was into the WWE at the time, or WWF, the wrestling. So I said, "Look, will we do a wrestling show?" And they're like, "This is what do you want to do, a wrestling show?" So it was one of the first kind of radio wrestling shows on the planet. And the only hook that I had for it was, this was a Tuesday, because Monday Night Raw went out on the Monday night and it wouldn't air on Sky until the Friday night. We'd have all the results off the internet. So we would present it that way, or I would present it that way.
Yeah.
So that was the hook. So people actually would tune in just so they didn't have to wait until Friday. So that was the hook in wrestling news. And then Colm O'Sullivan, who had a show before me up there, he got a gig as producer out in Red FM.
Right.
And after, I think station went on the air in January, maybe the following October, he rang me, he said, "Look, do you want to come out there and try this thing out with Charlie Wolf?" So Charlie was doing Cork Talks Back at the time. And I was like, "The wrestling thing?" He's like, yeah. He goes, "Look, we'll try just calling." So I forgot about it. A couple of weeks later, sent my wife for above in Galway in some hotel. And he's like, "Yeah." He rang me at 8. He goes, "Look, we put you on there about 9:10 with Charlie." And I was like, "That's grand." 9:10 came and went. 10:10 came and went. And he's like, "Oh, we're just running over." So 11:15, I went on with Charlie, and there was, it's one of these moments where you kind of sink or swim. And Charlie was like, "Hey man, why don't you do some of that like over the top American wrestling commentary?" And I was going, "What the do I do here?" So I'm shouting a hotel room down at like 11:30 at night with some fake wrestling commentary. My wife's inside in bed with her head in her hands. I'm sure the people next door to us were crying. Normally you hear all kinds of things going on in a hotel room next door to you, but I don't think anybody's ever heard something like this. So that was it. And I guess probably about a year later, the Henry Condon came to me, the late Henry Condon, who was the CEO out in Red. And Henry said, "Oh, do you want to do this?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, do you want to take over the show?" And I'm like, thinking in hard.
Hang on, you were on a couple of times before that, I imagine. Or was that after one?
Right. No, this was probably about 6 to 12, about 12 months in maybe.
All right, okay.
So I was like, I said, "But what about Charlie?" He goes, "Don't worry about Charlie. Charlie's going to morning." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And that was it. And I went in, and no idea about the desk, no idea about audio, no idea about jingles, ads, songs, anything. And Casey, who's in 96, gave me a crash course on the desk, 1 or 2 nights, and then that was it.
Wow. And
for the first week, Rashard was the producer. He kind of drove everything, as in he pushed all the buttons.
Right.
And then that was it. And 11 years later. So that was how I got into Red. That was how I got into the commercial talk sector. And, a couple of upheld complaints later and all of that was a really good experience. I'm very grateful for the opportunity for having 11 years at the helm of that. And I suppose while this sounds egotistical, it's not meant to be, but we had the number 1 show on the radio at night in Cork. We had really good numbers. And I remember when we started in the mornings, because the producer, like, radio in Cork is pretty small, and we took a while to get the wheels spinning, but like John, my producer, was friends with a couple of the production teams above a 96 as well, and they were like, "How are you doing these numbers?"
Right.
You know, and we were still like, you know, a fair whack away from Neil Prendeville, and that's not even taking into account of the Irish national stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
we were clawing away, and they were like, "How are you doing these numbers?" So yeah, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to have that position for 11 years. You know.
Savage. And you know, it's interesting to hear the story of it because, like, I remember listening a lot of episodes. But there's one in particular was your last episode, and I genuinely, well, I was almost in tears, man. Seriously, when I was listening to it, because I could even hear the emotion in your voice. Because 11 years that you were doing that, and then it was coming to an end. So, like, how are you feeling about that now? I mean, that when was that? 2014. So probably
That
7
was
years ago.
February, March 2014. You know what, Darren? Like that was a fairly uh, dramatic and you know galactic week, as it were.
Hmm.
So I suppose that I knew on, we'll say, the Monday. I knew on the Tuesday that was it. And for the best part, you don't really get a last show on radio because you're told, oh, that's it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they don't want the liability of somebody going on the air going, well, the CEO is this and the board
Yeah.
is this and
Yeah.
investors are that and blah blah
Yeah.
blah. So they said, well, I said, look, I want a last show, and they're like, right, when? I was like, Sunday, and they were like, okay, and they agreed to it pretty quickly. There
Okay.
was no arguing, there was no stipulations. Um, there was nothing that I wasn't, you know, I was just told, yeah, that's it, go do your last show, you know. Um, and I suppose for that week, it was kind of a bit stressed out. You know, we'd another baby on the way.
Hmm.
You're like, okay, you know, where's the next few bucks
What now?
coming
Like,
from? You know,
yeah. Yeah.
uh, but and that was trying to deal with the fact of you're doing something for yeah, it's like losing a limb or something. You know, you're doing something for 11 years, and on the Sunday, uh, the Sunday afternoon, it was just this grand Sunday afternoon. You know, drove into the station 8 or 9. We were on air at 10. Jono, the producer, had put together a little bit of a montage of some of the better bits from his time there, really.
Hmm.
And we went on, and you know, like all the newspapers are like, give us a comment, and I'm like, I'm not giving anybody a comment until I do this, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and I went on, I did the show. I guess it was when I was playing out this montage, kind of, I suppose, about halfway through, 20 minutes through, I'd kind of hit home, you know.
Mm.
Um, it kind of hit home, and that's where, you know, you're welling up and you're teary eyed, and you're like, Jesus, this is the last time that, you know, I'm going to speak to these 40,000 people or whatever the numbers were. And it was a very kind of a hard thing to do, not in the sense of I want to restrain myself and I want to, you know, tear chunks out of this person, that person, because, you know, radio can be a counterproductive environment. It can be a toxic environment, depending on where you are. Um, and you know, it would have been easy to do that, but it wasn't going to serve any purpose. You know,
Hmm.
it wasn't going to serve any purpose at all. Um, and I suppose the one thing is, you know, is like, what song do I play out on? What's the grand finale? Um, and it was Foo Fighters' "Best of You," I think, was the song I played out on.
Yeah.
But I used to always have a point every night going, "Good night, everybody." But the last thing I said in the radio was "Goodbye, everybody." You know.
Mm. Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
so that was that, and then like I took one last kind of walk around the station. Even though I still work with Red for a little bit after it, I don't think I went back into the station anymore. Uh, and I took one last walk around. I had my desk and stuff and office cleared out, and then just got into the car and drove home in a bit of a daze. And I came in and I sat in the couch. My wife had gone to bed. I sat in the couch and I just started reading emails and texts, and you know, there was a couple of you know, celebs had reached out. There was
Hmm.
different people had reached out, and I sat on the couch till about 2 or 3 in the morning. And then the following morning, we're inciting the emergency ward in the CUMH because my wife had just very bad cramps, the whole 9 yards. She didn't feel well. We had a baby on the way, Mia, and you know that was it. So like, it didn't get a chance to kind of take a break. And I remember we're sitting inside in the CUMH, and they have a dedicated section for emergencies and stuff. And there's all these other people there, and every one of them is just kind of staring. That's Victor Murray from the radio, you know. And that wasn't my concern at the time. You know, my concern at the time was my wife and the kid, and everything was going to be okay. And everything was okay. But it's just one of those things where, yeah, but it was a hard thing to do. Looking back on it, you know, I can't say I don't think about it. You know, like, it was emotional, as you say. You know, you've been part of something for such a long time. It is very hard to let go, you know. And so not long after that, I was offered a gig in 4FM, and I turned it down. And I turned it down because the money was crap. What they wanted was too much. And, you know, they were like, oh, well, this is a kind of a national radio station looking at me, you know. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay. And I remember it was at a press screening for one of the Avengers movies in Dublin at the time, because I had the moviebit.com as well, a website that we write and review movies. And I literally left the breakfast with 4FM after being, probably not going to do this, lads. Went to this press screening, and as I was walking up to the press screening, I was like, yeah, this is it. Radio's over, you know, because the whole thing for anybody in local radio, for a lot of people, is they want to go national because that's where the money is. That's where, you know, advertisers will pay an absolute crap ton of money just to have a national presenter read their lines in an ad. You know, you'd go for maybe 15, 20 quid a line in local radio to like thousands, you know. So that's when I knew it was over, you know, that me and radio was done. It was finished. But yeah, it was a hard night. There was a lot of tears, a lot of emotions. And subsequently, I think afterwards, I don't think I handled it the best I could mentally. I did struggle for a while mentally after it, because I suppose the way I described it to a couple of close friends is, you know, in Superman, when Superman says, I'm giving up my powers, and he loses the powers and he bleeds, that was the best analogy I could give. Even it's like, you weren't Superman. What are you on about? Why are you comparing yourself, you know, to a guy in a red jocks and a cape? But that's the way it felt. Yeah. You know, I was like, you know, I don't want to, I can't do a normal job, as it were, you know, this kind of thing. And it just felt that way. And mentally it was, there was a couple of dark days. There was a couple of really dark days, Darren, to be brutally honest. And you know, I'm a firm believer in that everything happens for a reason, and that something will fall into place. My wife was like, "What are we going to do?" And I'm like, the money is there for a little bit, you know. And she's like, "But it will dry up eventually, you know, because all I was doing was going to Costa Coffee every day, you know." And I kind of threw myself into the moviebit.com in a bit of denial, and worked hard in that. And then there's a friend of mine, DC, Donald Cahalan, who I met in the gym, of all places. He asked me, look, he goes, would you recommend a gym? I know you've been out in K2C, or what's known as now as SBG Cork. And he kind of, I met him out there one day, and he's like, oh, I'm working with these tech fellas. You should see the offices, you know. They have 80-inch TVs and pool tables and free food and drink. I'm like, this is like Google. What? I'm like, that's not in Cork anywhere. And he's like, no, it is. And I'm like, not a chance. He's like, look, come over and see the place. So I went over, I hounded him, and I went over to see Teamwork in North Point Business Park a couple of weeks later. And they were like, look, we want somebody to do video. We know you do video, because I was doing video for the movie bit. I was always doing video. And they were like, you know, and he was like, look, let's do it, you know, let's just do it. And if you don't like it, he goes, you're going to have to start off and support a bit, you know. And I was like, you're right. I said, that'll probably help me get to know the product. And he's like, just get in there. And he goes, look, if you don't like it, he goes, in 3 months, he goes, feck it, just go, you know. He goes, no harm, no foul. If you bought for Christmas, blah, blah, blah. and that was I'm 7 years in teamwork. In October as creative video director there now,
Wow,
heading up a small video team.
very
So
good.
so that's the kind of that's the I suppose the fall from grace or whatever to back up. Um, so that's the kind of the professional side of it. But yeah, it was very very tough. There was a couple of days where I wasn't sure if I was going to get out the other side, you know.
Mm.
But I remember a couple of months previous, I heard an interview with Steve Carell of all people, and one of the answers to his questions was about change and all this. And he's like, sometimes you just have to step into the darkness, and that stood with me. And sometimes that's what you do have to do. You just,
To, absolutely, to be able to see the light that's there, because if you're in tunnel vision the whole time and not seeing anything different, a change, as they say, snaps you out of it, and you have to
yeah,
kind of
no,
go,
100%. Yeah.
yeah. And when you think about snapping out of it, I mean, like, you've been, I see, like I say, you said it there. Like, I mean, look, you were 11 years, in Red, and now you've been creative director. So, like, you're busy and you keep yourself busy. So, I remember reading something about you that you find it hard to switch off, and you never switch off, and your mind is always going, always going. Are you still that way now? And if so, have you learned? What have you learned? How have you changed it?
Do you know what? Like, I know it sounds like a cliche. Oh, your man doesn't switch off. Blah blah blah. Um, I have huge trouble, darn, switching off. So I suppose I wear two hats, right? Creative video director with teamwork, where uh, video team is responsible for educational stuff, tutorial, sizzle, brand. We touch off of every facet of a pretty large business. They recently took on 70 million in funding a couple of months ago.
Nice.
Um, so huge customer base, and so I don't switch off from that. But then there's the other thing. I've always needed something else. I can't just come home and sit down. And I went back. I used to make vlogs in Red FM back in 2006. I
Hmm.
never knew they were vlogs. I just thought they were bad, but I was still doing them.
Yeah.
So I went back to that kind of not long after I started back in teamwork, or in teamwork. Um, so there's both sides of my head are spinning all the time. The only time I try and settle down is in the car when I'm driving somewhere,
Right.
and only if I'm on my own. I listen to a podcast. I listen to an audiobook. Um, but give you an example, I find it hard to watch movies as somebody who's wrote about movies for years. I find it hard to watch them now, in the fact that I'll fall asleep quite quickly, because it's
Right.
the only thing that will shut my brain down, or I just lose interest after 10, 15 minutes.
Gotcha.
Um, and I'm not saying I'm constantly churning out ideas, but it's just I don't know how to switch off, to be honest. The one thing I have found over the last couple of years, obviously with you've kids and stuff like that, you do switch off with them, and you do play with them, and you do whatever.
Yes.
Um, I found a huge love of barbecue over the
Well,
last couple of years. I'm not talking now like the burnt sausages on a disposable grill. Um,
frozen on the
I'm
inside, burnt on the outside. Yeah, I know those
Yeah,
ones.
no,
Yeah.
I'm talking about stuff where you're putting half a cow up on the top of a fire for like 12 hours.
Right.
Um, that's where I kind of find just time to sit down, sit out the back, like, even, and I barbecue all year round. Even just the winter, or just last January, February, back into barbecuing, just light an outdoor fire, sit out
Happy
the
days.
back with a beer, just the smell of smoke, and
Happy
this was
days.
at like 7 o'clock in the evening, when it's pitch black,
Uh-huh.
and the kids running around in the dark. Daddy's out here. There's a fire going. This is great, and that's where I find a bit of time to try and switch off. But if I took a day off, I'm like, okay, I have a day off. Let's go make a video. The So I suppose when your work is your passion as well, it never feels like work. But yeah, I have huge difficulty switching off, huge, and I'm not sure how to fix it. And to be honest, I don't even think I want to switch off. You know?
That's the thing. I mean, if you find it hard to fix something that you don't think you need to fix, then you really don't need to fix it. Because if you enjoy it and it's fun, and it's what keeps you going, then why stop? You know, and I mean, like, clearly you're a creative person, you know, so if you want to be creating different things, okay, you're creating a barbecue, brilliant. You're creating food, you're
Mm.
creating it, you know, the smell of smoke, exactly that. It fires the endorphins, and you're going, yeah, I'm enjoying this. Same thing in relation to, as you say, come home, make a video. You might have an idea when you're in the car going, I have an idea for something. And you come
Yeah,
home, and I nearly bet that you'll come home and you're straight away writing down, going, this is what I want to do. This is my opening scene. This is the middle part of it. This is what I'm going to, this is my hook. This is my thumbnail. And you've it all straight out. And all of
yeah,
a sudden you're like, I'm not going to let this sit. Done. And
yeah,
bang.
yeah. Like I suppose the only thing that I do be conscious of is sometimes the kids are like, "Hey, you have a camera out again. Can we not just go out without a camera?" You know, like, yeah. I'm kind of conscious of that in the fact, you know, and I suppose everything that I'm trying to do hopefully will be there for them in years to come. That there's a whole
Hmm.
bunch of memories there anyway. But you know, whatever success comes, this will hopefully help them have something better. You know.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting you say that because I mean, I've said it before on the podcast here. I mean, I started my YouTube channel as a joke. Just to go, I go taking photos, like take up the phone, I pretend it was Thomas Heaton, going, "Here I am, look at this, blah 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 blah." Send it to the lads, and all of a sudden I'm kind of going, "Do you know what? Might give one of those things a go." And it starts off something like that, but I really
Hmm.
enjoy making the videos, just like you enjoy making the videos. And as you say, you know, you started off in your daily vlogs back in 2006, so that's before the likes of Casey Neistat was doing his vlogs. So you probably were a trailblazer without even realizing that you were a trailblazer on the daily
Yeah,
vlogging
like
aspect of it.
my big regret is never keeping them going because probably one of the best things I could have ever done was record those last days in Red FM, the final
Mm,
night, the whole lot. I now, funnily enough, for a couple of weeks previous to that, ever before this happened, um, so before I went back from mornings to night, I did actually vlog the whole lot of that, unbeknownst to anybody. I have
right.
all of these on a Google Drive, just putting down my thoughts, driving the car, the phone like stuck onto the windscreen, that kind of thing. They'll never be they'll never be released, I guess, because I'm sure there'd be a couple of legal eagles come knocking on the door. But it's and I just always regret not continuing that or not doing the last thing because I probably would have had a head start. But you know, you mentioned Casey Neistat there. Like I wasn't a big fan of YouTube. You know, we'd all watch the stupid videos that would start trending or whatever they were.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember like we had an Apple TV or something, and there was a YouTube. The YouTube channel was on the Apple TV, and we used to just use it for Netflix or renting movies. And I was like, you know, was a $50,000 plane ticket or whatever, and it was Casey Neistat.
Uh-huh.
I watched that, and I was like, that's really really good. And then I watched another few of his videos, and I just started binging Casey every day. But I was like, I used to do this stuff back in 2006. And this guy's millions of views. I'm like, what am I doing? And it just went from there. And you know, I'm on YouTube 5 years properly, and it's probably only the last year and a half, 2 years that I've found my feet, I guess, because you know, like I tried to be like Casey. You know, I was
Right.
like, I can do that stuff. I
With a
thought I
Cork
had the
accent.
editing with a Cork accent. Yeah, exactly. You know, how you getting on, boy? And all this trap and hip hop stuff. How you getting on, killer? Uh, and I started doing that, and you know, throwing in random time lapses, not really concentrating on the story or any of this, and it was just random stuff, and a lot of it just involved, you know, depending on where you're listening, but. You know, we used to go to Douglas nearly every Saturday. We'd go over to Tesco or whatever, and like, fix the camera out again. And at the time, it was a Canon 600D I had, and you'd traipse around Tesco with that, and you'd be like, Jesus, I look like an awful clown here. You know, my wife was like, just put it away. And I take very little footage because I was like just too nervous to take it out.
Yeah.
Um, and it just kind of went from there. It was just random stuff. Then I did a couple of car insurance thing, and I couldn't, you know, to get any traction in YouTube, you do have to niche down. You do have to kind of specialize in something.
Hmm.
And a lot of the gurus will say specialize in something and then something within that something.
Hmm.
And the narrower you can make it. So it's about building the audience to pull you. And I was building very little audience. It was 10 subscribers here, 100 there, you know. at 1,000 subscribers. I thought this is amazing, which it was, and then because I was always the one that somebody came, I'm thinking of getting a projector, I'm thinking of getting a camera, I'm thinking of getting this, I'm thinking of getting that.
Okay.
Because I'd set up, like, even before that Casey and I said video, I'd helped a couple of people set up a bunch of YouTube channels because they all came for camera advice. I was like, maybe there's something in that. And then, I saw a leak for a GoPro video, the GoPro Hero 7. That got a good bit of traction. And, I was always looking to buy better gear because I do think gear does matter. It doesn't overrule story or anything. But people are conditioned to looking at like 4K video. They're conditioned to looking at stuff that's not full of noise. They're conditioned to looking at their favorite YouTubers who are all operating high production values. So that's what was in my head. But I was always trying to get something better, and I eventually stumbled upon the Sony ZV-1 when I came out because I'd done videos about leaked GoPros. They'd done like hundreds of thousands of views. I was like, this is probably another good thing. On the ZV-1 when the leak started with that. And then I was like, okay, I bought the camera, I bought the ZV-1 when it came out, and Paddy and Barker Photographic was able to get it for me.
Nice.
And bought that and just started explaining to people how to use the camera. And then I think there was about 40 or 50 ZV-1 videos went out. Halfway through all of that, I'd reached out to Sony initially going, I found through pure chance the one of the Sony reps for the UK and Ireland who's in charge of all the events and that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I reached out to him and I was like, oh, can I get this early? I'd buy it, but can you? And he's like, nah. That was it. Heard nothing back, and I'm like, oh, that's that gone. Yeah. But he came back to me and he said, would you make some content for us? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, will you make content for Sony? Will you make stuff about the Sony ZV-1? He goes, will you talk on a webinar? Will you put together video for us? I was like, yes.
Yeah.
It was just a no-brainer. And that's where I started to, that's where I started to find the footing, I guess. I was building the foundation slowly, but I was building half of a wall. Then I was like, will I build a window? But this kind of, made it a bit clearer on where to go in the whole cinematography, photography, storytelling, editing space. And we kind of just went with that, and did webinars with the likes of Wex Photo and Wilkinson's Photo and these huge camera stores.
Did they need a translator for that in Wex Photo?
No. they got me. And it was kind of hilarious just to see all of these wheels in motion again, and like Sony said, do whatever you want, showcase the camera. Like if you can showcase, we'll say in the ZV-1 product showcase, but up to you entirely. You don't have to, just do what you want.
Nice.
And we kind of went from there. So like the channel right now it's at 20,200 and something subscribers, 3.5 million views, which is a big deal to me.
Huge.
But in the bigger YouTube scheme of things, this is peanuts.
Squeak.
Yeah, exactly. I looked at a Marquez Brownlee video today as it went live, something about the iPad Mini, and I got about 6 minutes into it and I just stopped because I had to go do something else. But he 35,000 views in 6 minutes. I'm like, holy! But yeah, it's one of those things that finally I see the wood for the trees now.
But it's like, because I think like it's interesting you say it there, Vic, right? Like the vlog is something that you do, and you go around, you're holding the camera, and you say you might feel a small bit subconscious. You're out in the middle of, say, Douglas Village or Douglas Court, whatever it may be. When you're talking about something that you enjoy, and you're talking passionately about something that you enjoy, it's a lot easier. And I know from my own point of view, like any of the videos that I've made that get a lot of views are about gear, and people like to buy gear. I mean, I have a thing on the podcast constantly. It's G.A.S, and there's many reasons for G.A.S, and you've listed out 25 reasons for G.A.S, and all the different reasons why you have to have the latest or whatever it may be. But people like gear people like to buy gear, but more importantly, and I think the best thing about it is people like to learn about gear before they buy it. So go back 20 years ago and you wanted to buy something, you go down to the sound store and you go into Bobby and go, Bobby, is there any good? Ah, yeah, it's great. You can do this and it can do that. Whereas now you can go online and you can see somebody showing you the good,
Yeah.
the bad, the ugly, and the downright absolutely fantastic thing that you go, yeah,
Mm.
that's reason 47. Got to go get it. And
Yeah.
that's where I think gear is something because, you know, and we'll touch on it, I suppose, when we get to the second part of the show as well, because gear is something that you can't live with, but you can't live without. And
Mhm.
when you look back in the camera that you had there, as you mentioned, you know, starting out in relation to, you know, the Canon 600, now you look at that and go, Jesus, what was I ever doing with a Canon 600? But at the time, it was fantastic. At the time, it did everything that you wanted it to do. But guess what? These guys are masters at it. There's an extra little feature. We'll charge you an extra €600 for that feature that you never thought you needed before now. But guess what? You do, and you can't live
Yeah.
without it. And that's
Yeah.
the beauty of gear. So I think, you know, as you say, niche and then niche down. Like, would you prefer now to be doing your vlogs in the car, going around this, doing that, or would you prefer to be doing what you're doing right now, which is talking about something that you know a lot about? You've touched on the Sony ZV-1. I bought a
Like
Sony ZV-1. Your fault. It's because of you. But you know, like, and that's fact. That's hashtag true story. Because I was
yeah.
looking and I was going, I got to get a good camera here. I was sick of having issues in relation to. I had still have it, a Canon G7X Mark II. Dude, great camera, but I'm a seascape photographer, so it's been dumped in the water too often, and it started to fail. And I was like, okay, time to change it. If I go off and I watch Marquez Brownlee, brilliant, and he's very, very good. He's fantastic. But there's nothing local as far as I'm concerned in relation to that. And
Mm.
that's why when I found yours, and also Stephen Reed as well, who I know you're friends with, you know,
Yeah.
they're that's something when you go, these are people that I know to a certain extent. I don't know you, but you know what I mean. They're close by. I can relate to them. And it's going to be what it should be, good, honest feedback on how to use something. And I think that's where people can relate to it. It's not fake, you know, and I think that's where you've got a huge advantage.
Yeah, and I suppose in the YouTube space, there's lots of different stuff. So some people, you have sponsored content, um, or you have an overview content. So a lot of these overview videos are, I got the Sony ZV-1 just as an example. It does this, and this is how the audio sounds. But they'll never slate it because they've been given the camera for free, and that's
Yeah.
fine. And I've been given product for free,
Mhm.
and you know, they don't give much of an opinion on it. If it's an overview, it's an overview. It shouldn't be a review, So I'm pretty sure the contracts they sign are quite specific
Mhm.
in that. Then you have the sponsored stuff, which is where somebody is paying you to expose
Obviously.
their brand for
Yeah.
for whatever reason. Um, I became an Epidemic Sound ambassador. Then they said, look, we want to sponsor the channel for a year. And we want, so many videos for the period of 12 months. And do what you want. We don't want any creative control. And that's another one. And they're really good to work with. Um, but the authenticity comes into it. I had a recent GoPro video where it took off, and the amount of hate that came at it, because I really had a genuinely bad experience with the GoPro Hero 10 Black.
Mhm.
Unboxing it was all over the place.
Mhm.
And it's like, oh, boomer vibes and all the comments and they hate. And I'm just like, hide user from channel, hide user from channel. Um, but it's so important to try and give something that is authentic, And if something isn't good, then it's not good. You don't have to completely demolish the brand. And I remember when I started doing a bit more generic tech, I was looking for something for running or for walking, some set of headphones, and then I did a review of that, and that took off for whatever reason. And then every headphone manufacturer from the back ends of wherever started sending me headphones. And there was one company, and I was just like really kind of fresh in the space. There was one company sent me these headphones, I think about $120. And I said, look, give your honest review. Um, and an amazing box, an amazing set of headphones, but they were absolutely rubbish
Rubbish.
when you listen to anything through it. And, you know, I didn't agree to give them a look at the video. I don't do that. I'll have a kind of a product agreement thing. It's kind of generic, basic stuff. But one of the I don't give you the video for approval because this is the best version I'm going to get. The only changes I'll make is if there's a typo or there's whatever. Now, that can change depending on who you're dealing with. But this company were like, I put out the video and I got an email and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be blacklisted everywhere, you know. And they were like, actually, that was really good feedback. Thanks for that.
There you go. And
You know,
that's valuable, actually, Vic, isn't it? Like when you think about that.
Totally, but you can go all in and destroy a company just for the sake of the whole YouTube drama kind of thing. But the one thing I've learned, Darren, over the years is people can smell BS a mile away, right? And I learned that from the radio. If you're not yourself, if you're not authentic, people see through it. You know, even the trolls and the idiots that are living on the internet can see through whatever you're BSing about, you know. So there's no point. It's lost, you know. There was a couple of Star Wars videos took off for me where I was talking about The Last Jedi and these, and I was like, all these people had subscribed and none of them had really left because I was doing not Star Wars stuff after it. And there was a buddy of mine said, he goes, they came for Star Wars, but they're staying for you. And that always kind of stuck with me because it's a fair point that if you're authentic, then people are going to be attracted to that and you've some integrity about you. So that's hugely important as well, that you do have that kind of persona. Don't get me wrong, there's people out there who will sell their soul to the devil and they will say whatever they're told to say. I really don't think that's in me, you know. Now maybe somebody backs a truck of money up to the house, might be another story, but I'm not saying it can be bought, but no, it's, you know, look, I've been watching YouTube for quite a number of years, and the creators that I watch, I feel that they're authentic and genuine. And I don't see why I shouldn't be anything except myself.
Well, look, I could tell you a number of stories in relation to the exclusive aspect of photography and the photography sphere, let's just say, where somebody will send something out and it's this the best thing ever, and they'll put their name all over it. And 2 weeks later, they're selling whatever they got on the internet and they're sending messages saying how crap it was. So, I mean, look, the reality of the situation is, you know, if it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And I think the manufacturer should know about that as well. And also the public, because as you say, like what you don't want is somebody coming along. If let's just say that I tuned into yours and you said to me, or not said to me, but said to your audience, you know, Sony ZV-1, best camera ever. And I bought it. 2 weeks later, you're going, Sony ZV-10, 10 colors of crap out of the Sony ZV-1. You don't want to buy that Sony ZV-1. That was a useless one. You want to buy this. It's clear to me that there's an ulterior motive there. And you have to be honest to yourself first and foremost, which means that your audience can see how honest you are to them. And I think that's something that I enjoy about your channel, to be honest with you. You know, I mean, I've watched, like I say, a number of your videos, and it's where I can see something is real. It's the good, the bad, the ugly, and the downright outrageous. Either outrageously good or outrageously bad. And the audience will pick up on that, you know. I mean, you can't be a fair weather friend every single week. You can't, you know, be a Manchester United fan this week because they're winning and they won that game, and next week
no, it's a great way of putting it, actually.
You know, so look, I think it's been fascinating there, Vic, now listening to your YouTube journey. What I want to do is I want to take a very, very quick break, right? And I want to get back because I want to learn more about this fantastic studio that you've created at home. So I know there's going to definitely be an interesting story behind that. So look, I'll be right back after this. If you're enjoying this episode of the Irish Photography Podcast, why not jump back and listen to the back catalogue we have of episodes, where you'll get some great insights from fantastic guests, gear reviews, lots of hints and tips, and above all else, keeping you company while you drive or relax. Thanks very much for listening. Please consider subscribing, leaving a review wherever you're listening to this podcast. And you're very welcome back to the Irish Photography Podcast. So, Vic, like I alluded to there before the break, right? I've been watching your channel and I've seen your channel evolve, but I've also seen where you base yourself evolve, and your home has turned into a home studio. Tell me, there has to be a funny story behind that. I'm sure there is.
Yeah, so when we bought the house, we moved in 2006. So when we bought the house, we bought it off of plans. And that was the one thing I said to my wife at the time. I was a huge movie fan, and I had a projector at home. So I want one room for home cinema. And I also want another room for an office for, I don't know what, for the radio stuff. But I was like, I want a home cinema. And she was like, right. So this was a home cinema. The room I'm in, it's 8x10. There's an ensuite to the side of it. But at the time, we said to the builders, don't put on any, just put in the pipes. We don't want any toilets. Don't put any of that stuff in there. And they're like, why? I'm like, it doesn't matter. So that was fine. And, painted the whole thing black. And I had, uh, basically, I was able to get hold of cinema seats from the old Sheridan IMAX in Dublin.
Right.
Right. And I had 6 cinema seats inside here, right? Out of the IMAX cinema seats. And I had
Nice.
3 of them on, this is an 8x10 room now, right? And I had them on a platform. So I went to a friend of mine who worked out in the dump. And I said, if you ever see any pallets, just give me a shout. And he rang me one day. He goes, there's this huge pallet out here. Do you want it? And I was like, yeah, I'll come out. Got it into the car somehow, got it home and screwed it onto the floor. So the 3 seats would have been at the back, would have been slightly taller than the ones because they were elevated so you could see the projector screen. That was fine anyway. Got all that in, done, speaker, surround sound, and in that little ensuite, I put all the movies in there, shelved the whole lot. That was fine. And we just found we didn't really use it. And if you had 6 people in here, I don't really know 6 people anyway outside my family, but when you have 6 people in there between the projector on and an amp on, it got incredibly warm. Now there was a window there, but the projector screen was over the window. And I remember there was one Christmas, over Christmas, myself, my wife, her sister's husband, and my in-laws, Jared's mum and dad, they came down and we put on Love Actually. And for anyone that's seen Love Actually, there's a couple of dodgy nudie scenes in it with the porn stars or whatever, and you're like, I was like, oh Jesus, this isn't good at all. And there was this just awkward silence, and because it was an 8x10 room with 6 people in there already too close to each other, and there's oohing and ahhing and all kind of fleshy bits hanging out, and you're like, I was like, oh my God, it was just awkward. So we never really used it as much. And when the kids were born, they kind of, they love the idea of it because we do a movie night every Friday night or whatever. And when I started doing YouTube stuff, I needed somewhere to talk. So in this ensuite thing, I put in an old bit of a desk, bolted it onto the wall, and I was able to have a computer and a monitor inside there. And, this ensuite must have been, I don't know, Jesus, is it 3-4 foot wide? I barely fit it in there. So it was wedged in there, talking the camera. If you look at the earlier vlogs, you'll see all the movies and stuff behind
all
me.
the DVDs and videos behind you.
Yeah. And that was it. And I was like, so if I had to do an unboxing or anything, I couldn't swing a cat inside there. Sweat pouring out of me, constant swearing, trying to move a camera. And I got, I don't know, some piece of wood that I wedged into the wall. I screwed in a mount into that, and I was able to put the camera in as an overhead camera. But I had only one camera because that's all I could afford. So I do a bit of talking head, then I move the camera up, then anyway. So that was fine. As time was going on and the YouTube thing was starting to grow, I was like, I need to come out into the cinema space. But I don't want to lose the cinema because I'm this huge movie fan, or was. And I still like the idea, and I justified it for about a year or two after thinking that thought initially. I was like, the kids still love it. The kids never used it.
Friday nights, yeah.
And so I was like, okay, I have to pull the trigger. I rang my dad and I said, we're doing this. Took out the cinema seats, put the cinema seats out into the shed, and we binned them eventually. And then repainted it, bought the stereotypical YouTuber desk, which is a Carlby countertop for a kitchen, and then there's these Alex drawers and the whole lot on top of it. And then I had a load of cheap acoustic panels behind. I thought it looked good, and then it just kind of grew legs from there. And then I was like, I still don't have enough space. I still can't unbox anything. It's very awkward. I was like, I was comfortable, but then I wanted to keep a couch here because I bought another. Anyway, probably about a year ago, I bought another Carlby countertop, sawed it in half, put on, and my wife had this great idea. She goes, why don't you get casters on it? And then you can wheel out this desk or this countertop where you want it. So where I'm sitting right now, I have 2 countertops, or 2 Carlby countertops, this kind of walnut countertop, and it's about 10 foot long, and one of them is probably 6 foot long and the other one's about 4 foot long, or 3.5. So if I need to do anything with the second one, I can just pull it out and rotate it.
Sweet.
So that was really useful. So that's the current kind of guys. And then I went through another thing is like I hate looking at these acoustic panels in the wall. They don't sound. They don't seem to be doing much for the sound. I was like, they just look tatty. They just So I ripped all of them down, repainted the whole lot, and changed it into kind of what you'd see in the current kind of videos now, and just put up a couple of shelves and that. And that was kind of it. And then I put a TV up there as well because I just figure I
I have
can't
to have
let
a
go
cinema
of.
room, man.
Yeah, I just couldn't let go. So all I'm doing is watching YouTube videos. I'm watching Peter McKinnon at like 10 o'clock at night on a big TV, and that's it. And I put a PlayStation in there, but so that's the kind of studio space. There's a small 2-seater couch there. As I said, it's an 8x10 room. Um, and it's been a long story. I was like really depressed after throwing out the cinema seats because I had them for so long. It was one of these dreams as a kid that I always
Yeah.
wanted, a home
Yeah.
cinema. I ever said if we built a house in the morning and bought a house, I'd want to put a home cinema in there. And I was like, oh, the kids would love it. That's in the back of my head. But yeah, no, I love it. It's comfortable. Like, I suppose with all the gear and stuff, it does get messy quite quickly after every single shoot. I still haven't perfected it. I'm still thinking, could I mount a tripod onto the ceiling where I can just pull it down for something? Or will that affect something else? I'm still looking at other ways to try and make it that bit easier, because if something is easy to do, then you're more inclined to do it. While before, when I did start shooting out in the 8x10 space or the cinema space, I'd have to set up lights. These cheap soft boxes, and they were a pain in the butt to set up. It's just you're dragging out the lights, you're screwing them in, you're plugging them in, you're falling over cables. It was a nightmare, and it used to really stress me out to the fact where like I'm not going to make anything tonight. That was it. So in kind of the last version of this, I got this notion: why don't you just put the lights on the wall? So I put a Godox SL60W on one corner, which is my main key light. And then I put another Godox behind me, just as a kind of a rim light and a fill light, or a hair light rather, if I need it. But I did also keep the projector screen.
Okay.
So if I'm doing a thumbnail, I put on the projector screen, I turn on one of the lights and adjust the lighting for it, and then just put the camera on an interval timer and just shoot 30, 40, 50 photographs. And I have a clean backdrop, so it's a lot easier to pull it apart. So I have that whole process kind of down. I just wanted to make things as easy as possible. So when I come in, the camera's generally on a tripod. I might have to move it, and I can just press record and go. And I just find that just makes the process that bit easier. And if it's as I said, if it's easy to do, then you're more inclined to do it. But before it used to be an absolute nightmare. So that's the long story of the studio. It's gone through so many iterations that I still don't know when it's going to stop, to be honest.
Well, there's a number of questions come out of that actually, and the first one is,
Mm-hmm.
when you watching Peter McKinnon and you're watching Peter McKinnon do his studio, were you getting highfalutin notions that you were going to have, this and the fireman's pole outside the door and then the hanging cargo net, and then you have the cage for all the gear, and then you've got, your pool table? I mean, like,
Yeah,
that's something you go, Jesus, man, I'd love it. But
ironically enough, like Peter sold a lot of his gear. He's half of that stuff is gone.
gone. Yeah.
I I often looked at I'm going to rent an office space, but then I'm like, okay, I'll go from teamwork to the office to a studio offsite somewhere. I'll never come home.
Yeah.
So as much as I'm wedged into this spot, at least I'm home. And I thought what Peter did with his space was incredible. It was absolutely phenomenal, and it looks great, and it still looks great. But I don't know. I'd love all of that, but as I've accumulated more gear, I'm like, you still don't really, but I didn't get many notions. I did take a little bit of inspiration, I guess, from some of his stuff and Matty Hapoya, because like I know you can't, or the listeners can't see it, but right behind me, when I was doing this, the very kind of first version of this, I was like, Jesus, McKinnon there in Hapoya, they have this big wooden floor thing behind them, and it
Yeah.
looks really cool. It's the Stark wood. So I turned it off into B&Q, or it's like a Home Depot if you're in the States. And I bought a load of wooden floorboards, right? And I got these, and I bought like a couple of 8x4s or whatever, banged them onto the wall anyway, and tried to get and I slotted in the floorboards into it. But their floorboards aren't long enough.
Right. Okay.
So, and I don't have enough space, so I can't get no separation really behind it between
Okay.
me and them. And I was like, and then if you have a lens that's too wide, you see the edges. And I'm like,
Yes.
this was just a disaster. So I was like, I'm going to take it down. My wife said to me, she goes, I don't know, they give the room character. They never really feature in anything I do, but they're there. So I took that influence a bit too much, but yeah.
Yeah, you could get carried away, man. You could have so many different ideas that you could do things. You see something, go, yeah, that looks great. But it looks great for where they're using it for, as you say, because you might have a long distance in the background, as you say, for
Mm,
separation and such like that. And something that I've often struggled with, even if I'm doing any videos here from home, is lighting, because I've got a very,
mm,
very small area. So, like you're looking at me, and at the moment here now, I've got a ring light probably a foot and a half away from me on the left hand side, and I've got the laundry room on the right hand side here with the light on the side and there, which is trying to give me a back. Oh, it works, but it's not
mm.
ideal. I couldn't put a Godox. I put a Godox on the wall to be on the side of my face here because the wall is so next to me. So you have to have the space
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure. But I think, hats off to you. Like I say, I really wanted to talk about the studio space because I think it looks really, really good. You've
Thanks,
got
man.
some nice subtle lighting as well going on there too, and some nice use of color as well. I think within that too, which really, really works from the YouTube sphere. So yeah, fair play to you.
Yeah, thanks, dude. Appreciate it. I said I don't know what's going to be next. I'd love to stick a couple of acoustic panels onto the ceiling because I only recently struck out all of the movies and DVDs, got rid of a ton of them, and I put a recording booth in there because I still do voiceover stuff now
Hmm.
and again.
Hmm.
I'm doing a show that's on RT in October, actually, 19 episodes. So I kind of
Nice.
voiced a lot of that here. I voiced all of it from home here. So I just put in a little booth there and a monitor on the wall. I'm like, you know what? I might be doing another lot of this for a year, but at least it's set up properly,
Yeah, it's there.
Again, it's just trying to make things. Look, you wouldn't make toast in the morning if you had to drag a toaster out of a cupboard every single day. You know,
Exactly. Or if you had to go cut the sliced bread every single day, you'd be like, oh man,
yeah,
no wonder that.
yeah,
Like,
exactly, yeah,
yeah,
totally, yeah.
it's good to have things prepared that they're ready to go, that you can just go bish bash boom done, but also that you've got the space to be able to work, and like you say, you're doing an unboxing or something, right? As you say, all you got to do is bring over a table. But if you have to build everything up and tear it all back down again, that's soul destroying because you just get it right and you go, yeah, my lighting was bang on for this one. You'll never get it the same for the next one again. It might be slightly off or slightly to the left or to
Yeah.
the right.
Like there's a great YouTuber, Caleb Pike, and he does these kind of an all-in-one YouTube setup. So he is like it's a C stand, it's on wheels.
Hmm.
He's a light on it. He's magic arms, tension arms. He's all the mounts, audio, the whole lot, and it's just there. And he just like drags it out,
Yeah.
presses record, and goes. So there's lots of ways to do it, but whatever can make it easier, then
That's what it's about. That's what it's about.
yeah.
And speaking of making things easier, technology is supposed to make life easier. I mean, okay, computers are ones and zeros. There's nothing in between. So it either works or it doesn't work, right? So what has there been a bit of technology that you have come across now in all the years, and I say all the years, I'm aging you, like, but over the years, that has still blown you away to this day?
Um, I suppose if I go back to my earlier days, the Commodore Amiga 500 was an absolute
It was.
phenomenal computer that I learned to code in that. I was big into the demo scene on the Amiga, uh, and we had a demo group. A couple of us from Cork would code different demos and designs and stuff. So that still kind of blows me away that power was there.
Hmm.
I think probably over the last couple of years, iPhones are I know it's probably a cliche answer, but the amount of power that's in your hand From a photography perspective, video perspective, communication perspective, it's mind-boggling. Like a couple of years ago, I was in a shoot in Boston, and I was able to FaceTime the kids from outside Harvard. You know,
Hmm.
and you're
Hmm.
like going,
Hmm.
this is like stuff that you couldn't even imagine when you were a kid.
Hmm.
So like that those kind of pieces of tech definitely kind of yeah, they definitely stick out for me.
Well, yeah, absolutely, I fully agree with you. Except for one thing, which is I'm noticing recently about the new iPhone 13, that they're kind of going, why? Because it's more or less the same as the iPhone 12, and it's just there's no real evolution in the
Stop,
iPhone
darn!
2.
It's
You
got
know?
that cinematic mode. It's got
Oh
that.
yeah, man! Oh, I'm gonna buy it just for that, yeah. Well, no, but I think you're dead right, though. I mean, look, if you look at the power we have in our hands from an iPhone, 4K video, incredible photo quality, the portrait mode that's built into it as well, and again, as you say, a communication device. I mean, sat nav. Think
Yeah,
about that.
totally.
You
I
know?
could not get around without Google Maps on my iPhone.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah. And there it is, bang, done. And guess what? You can talk to people too. It's amazing.
Yeah, well, I don't do too much of that anymore, but yeah, no, 100%. Like, and that's the thing. We're using our phones for everything except what they were probably designed for back in the day. But I don't think that's a bad thing either. You know.
No, it's not. I mean, I worked in the mobile phone industry years ago, back in 1997, as far as 2001. And I remember at the time when WAP came out, which was called Wireless Access Protocol. And I
Hmm.
remember going to ESAT Digiphone at the time, and they were showing us this thing. We're going to send a WAP message now, and it's up on the big screen. And the message was like dot matrix. Hello. And we were all, Jesus, man, this is just incredible.
Yeah,
Now, now look at it. You can stream 8K video
yeah, yeah,
from YouTube on the palm of your hand in the middle of a
yeah,
field in Connemara.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's
I agree
crazy.
with you. Yeah,
It's insane. It's
it's a
insane.
good one. It's a good one. And speaking of video and what video can do, I noticed that you've been involved with Power of Video as well. Tell me a bit about that. What's involved in it and what you like most about it?
Um. So, Power video. Like when I started watching these Casey Neistat videos, he turned up in Belfast at one thing, and I'm like, this is pretty interesting. This Power. Taught nothing more about it. And then the following year, um, it turned up like this Power Video event, and it was in the Bullet Hotel in Belfast, not too far away, I think, from the Cathedral Quarter. Gorgeous little hotel, and I said, "Oh, geez, I'd love to go for this." And I think it was on for it was just one day, you know,
Right.
and uh, went up whatever day and arrived that morning to go in and was in a back room of the bar. It was a function room. I guess it probably held about 30 people. Um, and they had something like a kind of a general all public access kind of show thing where people would speak. I think that might have been in the Ulster Hall, but
Hmm.
this was kind of for the professionals, for a bit more of an industry day.
Hmm.
Uh, so you had the likes of Peter McKinnon, you had the likes of Devin Graham, um, one of the I can't even pronounce his name. Michel, anyway, he was one of the big Red Bull creators at the time. You had
Right.
Philip Bloom. You had all of these, giants of the industry. Admittedly, like McKinnon had 500,000 subscribers at the time, but he was very well known.
Hmm.
So you had all these people, and there was maybe 20 of us sat in this back corner of a pub function room,
Okay.
and these guys gave 30 minutes, 40 minutes of talks, of how they ran their business. Like Peter did stuff around B-roll and how B-roll helps you tell the story. And he, I remember at the time looking at this going, this is where I'm going wrong, more B-roll. Philip Bloom kind of talked about his experience, and that was the first one. And that was it just blew me away. What I kind of learned and what I picked up. And when you're around a bunch of creative people, the energy is hugely infectious,
Agreed. Yeah.
and it's inspiring. You know. And I remember talking to McKinnon about like he had a disaster of a flight, and we were talking about Aer Lingus and chatting away. We're chatting away for a good bit, and you speak to everybody because you were in such a very close environment. And afterwards, everyone just hung around,
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the following year went up again, and this time it was a little bit bigger, and you McKinnon again. They held it in the industry day. They held it in the cinema there, at the Odeon in Victoria Square shopping centre in Belfast. Um, so they had Peter McKinnon, they had Matty Kapoya there, they had Jesse Driftwood, they had Aaron. Did they have Aaron Kraskell? They had Aaron Kraskell there. Did a whole bunch of creators anyway at this, and like McKinnon rounded it out, finished the whole thing out, and he did this talk in the cinema in his socks. And I remember like going again. I just went to the industry day, and again, this was something that people would remember you from the year before.
Mm-hmm.
And I made some friends up there, and I remember like on the drive up, one of the organizers, Billy, he messaged me and he goes, "You're on your way?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Look, we're having this party this evening," and he goes, "Because you're in the industry day, look, do you want to tag along?" And he goes, "All the crazy." I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, and so you were sitting inside in wherever this was in Belfast, and just everybody, talking rubbish. These big lengthy conversations, the likes of Jesse Driftwood or McKinnon, just everyone chatting out, eating pizza, beer, having fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember at the end of the industry the following day, I remember I was talking to McKinnon, and he's like, "I remember you from last year." And he goes, "You sat exactly there." And he, like, at 5 o'clock or whatever. And I'm like going,
Wow.
nah. And I actually went back and looked at the video, and from his perspective, it was exactly 5 o'clock where I was,
Wow.
So I just got to know everybody there. And we went again 2019, which, again, you had the industry kind of day. You had an industry night, which they brought in some of the brands, like Sennheiser gave a talk on binaural audio and 3D audio. You had a choice of different workshops to go to. Then you had the industry day in Ulster Hall, but the night of the kind of the brand stuff, they brought us to Danske Bank in Belfast, and they put us into a vault, and you had the likes of Cody Warner, Potato Jet, and Ellie Mills giving a talk, and again in this very intimate environment. Now, sweat was pouring out of everybody. There was no aircon. You're in a vault in a bank, and again that was very, very cool. And then I was always kind of oh, if you ever need someone to talk, and they're like, "All right, yeah, we'll keep you in mind," kind of thing, because I got to know the guys who were running it just through conversations, because I'd be the first one out. I would come back from the event. I would put the vlog together in the hotel room that night, and I wouldn't stop until it was gone out. So I think they appreciated that, and I just got to know them very well. And then they were like, I pitched them, and they were like, "Yeah, okay." I pitched them a talk. They're like, "Yeah, okay, that'll do it." And then COVID hit, and then they came back again this year, and they're like, "Yeah, you're booked for this year," but then obviously COVID was causing still problems. So something like I hadn't been in Belfast in years. I'd only kind of been once before, and Belfast is now one of my favorite cities on the entire planet. The last couple of years, we've taken the kids up there on holidays every summer holiday. We've gone up to Belfast. We've gone to the north of Ireland, and it's just a great space. But I think, as I said, when you're surrounded by these creative people, even people in the crowd, that everybody's there for the same reason, and everybody will jump into a video. They don't, whether they know who you are or not, they will jump into a video. They will take every idea. There was a guy, Oren, there, the last one that they had, and he was like going around to everybody, walk down the street. When I tell you to stop, just freeze. And then he rotated around, just was like a matrix shot. It was a very clever idea, but he got everybody to do it. And all of the creators that were there were open-eyed Sean Juris in the video and stuff like that, and they just took your direction, So again, you cannot go, if you don't go to something like this and be inspired, then there's something wrong,
Hmm.
No, not all of the talks were amazing. There was one or two where you're like, ah, but said the industry day stuff, you did learn a lot. He's come back with like a notebook filled to the brim of tips and strategies and things to try out,
Hmm.
just different perspectives. There was no secret sauce. There was no, oh, if you put this hashtag in, the algorithm will put you. There was none of that. It
Yeah.
was just, this is another way of trying to do something a different way that you might have never have thought of, and that was energizing and inspiring.
But I agree with you wholeheartedly in relation to the whole concept of being around other creatives. You feed off the energy in relation to it. I mean, again, photography. Typically, photography is a kind of a lone sport, right? You're going off. If you're a wedding photographer, you're on your own unless you've got a second shooter. If you're a landscape photographer, you're up in the first thing in the morning, last thing in the evening. You might be on your own most of the time. But when you go out with a bunch of people, you feed off each other. Ideas will come. And when you start bringing video into that as well, I mean, there's an energy there, there's an
Mm,
excitement there that you can't bottle and bring it with you. You have to be there
yeah.
to be part of it. But it's interesting just listening to you talk about it, Vic. I mean, the passion that you felt, it's still there, and you can feel that as well. I mean, your mindset and your state of mind at that time, you can go back to that and those feelings, and you can draw from that again when you ever
Hmm.
need to, because you were there, you were part of it. You can explain it to me, absolutely, and I can feel that. But from your own point of view, if you're ever feeling going, geez, I don't feel like doing it, all you got to do is bring your mind back to when you were there with the guys and learning from them and going, you know what, yeah, whatever Sean Joris says, just don't think about it, just do it.
Hmm.
What's the phrase they have is done is good enough as opposed to perfect.
Yeah, done is better than perfect. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, totally.
so and that's where I think these events, and I love the name of the whole concept, that the power of video, because you have to tell a story. You have to keep your
Mhm.
audience engaged. And if you know that, and I see that in your videos watching on YouTube, you're taking them on a journey, be it good or bad. I mean, you talked a moment ago about the YouTube, the GoPro and the frustrations. I knew straight away by looking at the thumbnail and that, okay, this is going to be interesting. But the reality is, it was very interesting, and you took me the whole way through. I remember commenting and going, "Yeah, this is fantastic. It's the best thing I've seen all day." Why? Because it was you weren't taking it too seriously, but you were taking it seriously because you were genuinely annoyed or pissed off. There was like, "Why is it
Mhm.
taking so long to update this?" Right? So you will get the feelings from that when you're in a big event, when you're talking to somebody, like let's say McKinnon. McKinnon's a big name, right? So 500,000 subscribers. What's he at the moment? 5.4 million subscribers, right?
Yeah.
Casey Neistat. Casey Neistat is a visionary in relation to the whole YouTube sphere. I mean, I love the story of Casey Neistat. It's something which is still fascinating me in relation to his company Beam and how he sold to CNN for $23 million. And now he's in LA being a surfer, and he's not making videos anymore. But people are still wanting to be part of that.
Mm.
I guarantee you, if he released a video tomorrow, it'll be straight in, faster than Marquez Brownlee, and there'll be more people going, "What's he up to? We miss Casey." So people buy into that whole idea of learning from others. But when you're there in the moment, in a fault with Cody Wanner telling a story in relation to whatever he mentioned at that time, you feel a personal aspect that you can draw back on that. And that's
Mhm.
what movies, you know, I love the Avengers. Okay, I've never met any of the Avengers, but I can tell you that, you know what, if an Avenger movie came out tomorrow, I know I'm going to enjoy an aspect
Mhm.
of it. But when you can live and breathe in that, as I'm talking, something comes to mind is Transformers. My wife's American, and we were always go to the States before we had the kids. We used to go every single year, and I was in
Right.
Chicago having dinner, and all of a sudden I see the whole road being closed off, and I'm like, "What's going on here?" And I go outside the door, and they're closing off the whole area. By the river because they were filming Transformers 3.
Sweet.
I remember this. I still won't get it out of my head because this is big movie. I've never been around a big movie in my life. But I go off outside the door and there's this guy with a clipboard. And I said, typical, cheeky Irish fella, like, "Hey, what's going on here?" And he goes, "Oh, we're filming Transformers, sir." I was like, "All right, I go in." He goes, I said, "What's your job?" He goes, "I'm continuity." I said, "How do you mean continuity?" He takes out a folder and he starts showing me pictures of what they've taken that day. And they have to bring all the parts of the buildings that I'm looking up at that were made of styrofoam back down and putting back in the same place. So I saw parts of Transformers 3 before they were even in the cinema. And that to
Yeah.
me, when I go to the cinema, I've been part of that. So I can absolutely
Yeah.
100% get the idea of being part of that collective culture, that hive mind situation. And I imagine when you came back down the road after putting your video out there for Power of Video, you were like, yeah, next one, come on, bang him out, bang him out, bang him out. And I guarantee you the quality of it as well increased from the industry days, yeah?
100% from what you'd learn. And I suppose, secretly when you're putting this together, you're like, oh, I hope McKinnon sees this, or I hope Philip Bloom sees this, or
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
and I don't know whether that makes you work harder in the edit. You should always work harder for the audience. But I remember Philip Bloom actually came back and was well impressed with one of the vlogs. He thought this was a great vlog. And I know McKinnon had liked a few of them. So I'm like, oh, yeah. So I'm like, in my own head, if they think it's good, then it must be good.
Yeah.
You're kind of, I suppose, when you're starting out, you want validation from, I won't say your heroes, but you want validation from people that you admire or that you get inspired from, because
They're doing a good job.
you're doing it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that always helps, but like you have to be open to it as well, Darren. That's the other thing, right? Because I remember I was like, oh, sure, what am I going to learn? I'm editor supreme. My first session, when I finished, I was like, I know nothing. I'm an idiot. I know absolutely nothing here. These guys are on a different stratosphere completely. I know nothing, you know? And that's when you reassess and you go back and you learn and you learn and you learn and readjust and keep going. And I think that's the one thing with Power Video that they have helped inspire so many creators. A lot of them still, are they making videos? No, but they gave it a go, and making videos or taking photos. It's not for everybody, and that's absolutely fine.
Mm-hmm.
But there are people who've still been there. I remember Ali Abdal I think is his name. He was this medical doctor in the NHS. He was a doctor in the NHS in the UK, and he sat behind me at Power Video. I had no idea who he was, but I always remember his accent. I was like, that sounds familiar. Because I'd seen one or two of his videos, because he did these things, how to pass your medical exams, or he had one of these 2 videos that the YouTube algorithm served me up. But he asked our leaves about, well, I do this and I do that and I do the other. And he shut him down straight away, going, pick one thing, and he's in the productivity sphere now, well gone away from the medical stuff and the exam stuff, but he's five odd million subscribers plus now, £1 million business a year.
Wow.
And here's somebody else that maybe that conversation did change, his course.
Mm-hmm.
Something that was said, whether it was right or wrong, got him to think about something else in another way.
Mm-hmm.
I thought about B-roll in a completely different way from what Peter McKinnon had said. I thought about stock footage in another way from stuff that Devin Graham had said. So all of these things are part of the journey. And again, if this is the path that I'm on, I feel I absolutely was always going to be there. In the crowd or whatever, and learning. But you have to be open to it as well, because everybody likes to think that they're the best at what they do until you meet somebody who's better. And that's where you can go, can I learn something here? Or am I just going to be, egotistical and go, whatever, So you've got to be open to it. And not everybody is. I said, I was one of the people who's like, I know everything. I'm like, you haven't a clue. Sit down, son. You don't know anything.
Well, these guys are doing what they're doing because they're good at what they're doing. They're enjoying what they're doing. The audience can see that they're good at what they're doing, and that's why they engage with it. And if you could take 10% from that and bring that to yourself, then that's 10% better than you were yesterday. And if you meet somebody else and you get 10% from them, then you're 20% better than you were 2 days ago. And that's life, really. We never stop learning. The moment you think that you know everything, forget about it. Just stay on the couch and don't bother getting up again, because you will never know everything. Like,
100%.
And I think, like, when we talk about, power of video and the storytelling and keeping the audience engaged and such like that, like Peter McKinnon, we go back to Peter again, but the vlogging would have won DX. And people go, what's he doing vlogging with a 1DX? Okay. Now all of a sudden people wanted to buy a 1DX because Peter was able to get buttery smooth, as he says, and his
Yeah,
slow-mo and his B-roll. Coney
yeah,
Warner was vlogging a manual focus. Now he's gone out of that. He finally saw the light in relation to that. But I remember at the time he was believing that's how it should be done. And Casey Neistat did a video with him going, this guy does it manually, and so did Peter McKinnon. And then I see him with Jesse, and Jesse's teaching him how to use the EOSR and get away from the hole. So you will
yeah.
always evolve. You're always changing, and like something I wanted to ask you actually, and I think it's something, which is akin to your own channel, because your channel has evolved away from your daily vlogs into gear. And do you think that people buy gear because they think it's going to make them a better filmmaker or a better storyteller? Or should they learn how to use the gear that they have better to enable them to tell a better story and make a better film?
You know, that's I can make the Sony ZV-1 dance for you, but that doesn't mean I can use it to tell a better story.
Okay.
If there is, and obviously, look, we all want the new shiny stuff. I recently bought a Sony FX3 because it was the dream camera, 4K 120.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I still haven't had time to dig into it properly. But that camera is not going to make me a better storyteller. It's going to make stuff look a little bit better, and it's going to give me a couple of options that I, as a creator, want. Like I want to expose 4K 120 and so on. But theoretically, my daughter has this tiny VidiZoom camera that, she got as a birthday present, 50 quid, 60 quid, or whatever. She can make a great story on that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter. So buying gear thinking that it will make you a better creator is wrong. Buying, we'll say, a zoom lens because you need some dementedly, long separation, or you want as for a specific need as part of something you're trying to create, that's a different story, no pun intended.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
just buying something shiny and new, it's not going to make you a better creator. If you were to spend 500 quid on a GoPro because it was new, and maybe spend the time to learn how to use it, that's still not going to make you a better creator. Would you have been better off spending that 500 quid on ways to tell a story?
Mm-hmm.
Would you have
Mm-hmm.
been better off just taking a fifth of that 500 quid and buying a couple of books like Long Story Short, or any of these books that do a really good job of explaining story structure, even from the beginning, middle, and end? And that's something that's hugely important, because that's all people will remember at the end of the video. So it has to make them feel a particular way. YouTube specifically is entertainment or education. And obviously it blurs the lines at times, but they have to feel a particular way by the end of the video, whether that's inspired, whether that's knowledgeable, whether that's laughing, sad, whatever. And the only way you can do that is not with an 8K camera, but the only way you can do that is with a story.
Agreed.
And even from the photography perspective, every picture, and I know it's a cliche, but it's so true, every picture should tell a story,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, buying better gear, you're out of your mind if you think it's going to make you a better creator, unless you have a specific need. But just invest the money in telling better stories,
Yeah,
or
unless
learn
you
how to edit better stories.
well, yeah, that's the thing. Like, if you want to go and take photographs of birds, for argument's sake, you're not going to be able to do that with a wide angle lens. You need to have a zoom lens to get proper
Mm-hmm.
photos. It's just not possible unless the bird is dead and that you can get close to the bird, because the bird's going to fly away,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
that's where you will have to have certain gear in relation to do it. But it's interesting you say, learn how to edit better. I mean, like we mentioned a second ago about an iPhone. An iPhone camera is better than the camera that you showed me at the very beginning. The quality that's within
Mm-hmm.
it is far superior. But you have that in your pocket right now. So you can tell an incredible story. Only recently in my real job, I had somebody ask me, about a camera because they knew that I'd take photos and stuff like that. And I said, don't waste your money on it. You have a phone, master it with your phone first of all, that you really understand what you're doing first. And then if you want to build to upgrade it afterwards, once you
Mm-hmm.
understand how to use it, because you'll only get frustrated. Like,
Mm-hmm.
editing is something interesting, and it's something I want to touch on there in relation to editing video, but just on editing photos. I edit my photos in Lightroom. I don't use Photoshop. Why? Because Photoshop scares the shit out of me, because there's so many different buttons. There's so many different ways to do exactly the same thing. I can do what I want to do, which is edit a photo in Lightroom. I've started to
Hmm.
learn Photoshop, yes, in pieces, but you could you can do it this way or you can do it that way. You can, I'm like, oh Jesus, whatever. I just want to get the photograph edited, right? But when you start going into video, and that was something that I really it broke my heart at the beginning, and it still breaks my heart to be honest with you, because you know, get it right in camera. Otherwise, you won't be able to fix it in post. But you can fix certain things in post, but you can't turn a
Hmm.
pig's ear, or so what's the phrase? A sow's ear or pig's ear into sow's, whatever the phrase is, right? If it's muck,
Polish a
it's
turd, maybe.
yeah, exactly. If it's muck,
Yeah.
it's muck, right? So
Yeah.
I noticed when I was watching stuff on your channel, you use Adobe Premiere.
Hmm.
Why Premiere? Why not Final Cut Pro? Or why not DaVinci?
I suppose predominantly, even though I have a MacBook, I really have great difficulty trying to use Macs. It's I'm just too used to Windows. So when I started video editing years ago, I used Sony Vegas, and then I went to when I was entering these animated shorts and stuff into film festivals, I used to use Adobe Premiere, Adobe Premiere 6, because there was a good way of outputting from that full screen, and you could into a little kind of a SCART box, and you could record it onto VHS and you could submit your video.
Okay.
And then I went back to Sony Vegas because Sony Vegas was just that bit easier. And then when I started in teamwork, I was like, Sony Vegas really isn't a kind of a commercial piece of kit. But nobody knew what I was editing on, and nobody still knows what I edit on or what you'd edit on or
Yep.
whatever.
Yep.
Um, and I made the switch in teamwork to Premiere probably about 6 years ago, and I went all in it, and I just never left. So I got completely into the kind of the Adobe ecosphere, especially around After Effects and that. So dynamic linking is something that's useful. Um, and just on a slight tangent, I think DaVinci Resolve is probably the best piece of software out there for anyone that's starting out. If you start in that, it won't do you wrong. So I used to do a round trip workflow. I'd edit in Sony Vegas, I'd color grade in DaVinci, then back out with XMLs or whatever. It was just a painful process because at the time, DaVinci is still like one of the Hollywood industry standards for color grading. And there's, like I'm using the stuff that the lads in Hollywood use. So sure, it must be good.
It must be good. Yeah.
Um, going back to that inspiring thing, and I stuck with it. And over the last couple of years, Blackmagic have really evolved DaVinci Resolve into an absolute beast of a software suite, editing, grading, fusion. It's kind of similar to After Effects, and it's optimized within an inch of its life for every computer. While Premiere is, I think, it's still built on some legacy code that they can't change because the whole thing will explode.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had so I just, even though I've gone back to Resolve every now and again, and I've looked at it even as close as about 9 months ago to see could we use it commercially, it just doesn't fit the workflow. So for me, I'm just too kind of into the whole Adobe suite between Photoshop, After Effects, Illustrator to a point, Premiere Pro, Lightroom, Lightroom on the CC or Lightroom Mobile or whatever it's called.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just too far in there. But it's not that one is better than the other. All they do, ultimately, forget about color grading. Ultimately, all an editing piece of software will allow you make cuts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And where you cut is where you're telling your story, is
Mm-hmm.
where you're keeping the pace going, where you're putting in the shots. And they all do that in the exact same way. Cut, 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 export. That's it. So they all do the same thing. So it's not necessarily one is better than the other. For me, I use After Effects quite a bit. So that workflow works for me. I like the Lumetri color grading in Premiere Pro. Even though like DaVinci is a node-based editor for color, it's very different, but that works exceptionally well. But ultimately, they're all doing the same thing. Nobody cares what it's edited on. It's what I would suggest to anybody is try them all. They're all free trials. Even same the photo aspect. Some people will go to Affinity Photo because Lightroom doesn't cut it in the iPad, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And no particular reason. I guess I'm just comfortable with it, and I don't have the need to change. Don't get me wrong. Darren, there are some days where I'm like, how many times can this thing crash?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, because it's still not as optimized as Final Cut is probably the fastest piece of kit out there on something like an M1 MacBook or a Mac Mini at the moment, because it's an Apple product, and Apple products are optimized for the best possible user experience. And DaVinci is close to that. Adobe, on the other hand, Premiere not as much. I think they should just slow down the updates in Premiere and rebuild the whole thing from scratch. And I think Premiere Rush was some kind of version of that, and it works really, really well. But yeah,
He's rushed.
I'm just, yeah, exactly. I'm just too into the Adobe sphere to be honest. They are expensive, but their stuff is really, really good. But the other ones said nobody knows what you edit on.
Absolutely. And you know what? As you're talking there, it kind of thinks, somebody who starts off in a Canon camera invariably stays with a Canon camera or Nikon. But, obviously you're different to that because you've changed, obviously, from the Sony point of view. And then obviously GoPros, because GoPros have been something that, we've alluded to a number of times there. They're like the gift that keeps on giving because, they'll keep coming up with new iterations. But it's the same thing. You start off with an action camera that you stick onto helmet of somebody or a boat or whatever it may
Mm-hmm.
be. But now a GoPro is something like you used there recently when the Cannonball came to Cork. And you can go around. It's not as intrusive. It's something which is small. So
Mm-hmm.
somebody who starts off in a GoPro is not going to feel as comfortable moving over to a full size DSLR or whatever it may be. So similar
Yeah,
to the editing point of view, and for me, like I say with Photoshop, I mean I have Photoshop. I learn it slowly, but it just confuses me when I want to get the job done. I use Final Cut Pro for my video editing, and I don't see any issue with that. I thought about going to Premiere and going, okay, but what does it do that Final Cut doesn't do? And it's what you're comfortable with. I mean, ultimately,
yeah.
as you say, nobody knows or cares what you edit on. They're more interested in what the final outcome is going to be.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah.
It's whatever works for you. There's people are making videos on iMovie. There's so many of these compilation channels, um, and you'd see the occasional transition. You're like, oh, that's an iMovie transition. But sure, what
Hmm.
about it?
Hmm. Hmm.
They're still pulling in millions of views, and these things are edited on phones or they're edited on the software doesn't matter. It's what you do with it is what really counts.
Absolutely, absolutely. I've got one final question for you, I suppose, before we go for a final break. And it's something I think that we've alluded to at the very beginning as well, about the whole aspect of a creative outlet, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, so, like for me, photography for me is my release from the real world. Okay, so I work quite long, I suppose, high pressure job. Let's put it that way. But when I go off out with the camera, it's my release. It's my release from the real world. But it's also really important for me to be able to get time with me. From your point of view, I think, we alluded to earlier on about, having the creative outlet to be able to free up your mind and get rid of all the baggage and help from
Hmm.
the mental health point of view. How do you think it is, how important do you think it is from the creative side of things with photography, video editing, whatever it may be, is vital for mental health?
I think anything that can take you away from the humdrum of everyday life, or something that is that's going to wear you out, whether that could be your day job, it could be your night job, it could be whatever. I think it's hugely important that you do get that release, and a lot of people don't get that release because they don't have. My attitude is, why isn't everybody making YouTube videos? Why isn't everybody pressing record? I don't understand why they're not. Um, but that's me. Like for me, it's not necessarily a release at all, because I'm shooting for the edit
Hmm.
constantly.
Hmm.
I'm looking at a shot list constantly, or I'm plotting out the next thing in my head. But it's hugely important to have something, and I guess for me is, I watch my old videos all the time, and before a video is published, I'll have it looked at 2 or 3 times, because I actually get that shot of endorphins or serotonin or whatever,
Hmm.
um, from seeing the finished thing. So
Hmm.
for me, that's the release, and then it's on
Hmm.
to the next one.
Hmm.
But it's hugely important, like if you put away an hour every day or every night to watch YouTube videos because that makes you feel good, great, you
Hmm.
know. Um, we covered so much stuff with mental health on the radio over the years, and it's something that it's always close to my heart. I've had my own mental health issues. I think at this stage, um, everybody's had them, and I don't say that lightly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you do need something. You do need something, and like from a creative perspective, right now everybody has that outlet in their pocket. You know, um, maybe somebody doesn't like making videos, but you know what? Maybe somebody likes drawing on a tablet. Maybe somebody just has a passion for taking photos. They don't know it, but until they do, and then before you know it, they're looking at the end result.
Mm-hmm.
And then 6 months' time, they might go, "Oh, that was the first photo I took with my phone. Look at the one I've taken now." And
Agreed.
that's progress. And I think progress is very like, we're a reward driven society. We're always looking for likes or views, but I think when you can see your own personal progress, it's a huge release. That said, as I said earlier on, like video or photography may not be the outlet for everybody. It could be knitting, it could be painting, it could be as simple as walking the dog 10
Mm-hmm.
times a night,
Mm-hmm.
and so be it. But whatever works for you. And I'm sure there's loads of kids out there that have passions that they don't know about because they're not exposed to it. There's nobody encouraging them about it. There's nobody going, "Did you ever press the button?"
Yeah.
Nobody's asking the question for one reason or another. Now, I'm a big believer that you have to help yourself before you can help anybody else. But still, I think it's a valid point. I think when you're like, some people are naturally creative, you can't force it either, because if you're like, "Oh Jesus, if I take photos now, I'll be less stressed out. Sure, I'll get away for an hour every night." But then if you're out and you're struggling with a camera or a phone, and then you're
Yeah.
trying to edit it, and you're like, "Jesus, this is the worst thing I've ever done."
Yeah.
And then you're compounding one problem and adding another to it, and in a week you're worse off than you ever were. So, if it works, again, like the software or the camera, whatever works for
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
try and find something, because we all need something. I'm a big believer. This cannot be just life. This cannot be it. There's more to it than this.
Mm-hmm.
It can't be, let's go to work, let's come home, and that's it.
Yeah.
Let's play it, and all of those things are important, but that can't be just it. It's for me anyway, there has to be something else, whether that's somebody buying a Sony CV1. Not that I get any commission from Sony, but there has to be something else where you make an impact or a change on somebody's life. And I guess that's probably the radio career that I've had, where we helped an awful lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that I'm every night going, "Oh, well, I helped 10,000 people in that video today." It's not that. It's just knowing that the smallest thing can make the biggest difference in somebody's life. So I think that's kind of that's hugely, hugely, hugely important, that everybody has something that they can offer. Um, and you don't know what it is until you try a couple of things. Even on the video side of it, as an argument, there's this whole theory of 5 buckets of content or 3 buckets of content. So let's say somebody's starting a YouTube channel in the morning. Okay, I'm going to make 5 knitting videos. I'm going to make 5 YouTube tutorials. I'm going to make 5 photography tutorials. I'm going to make 5 comedic sketches. I'm going to make 5 whatever. And you'd see what sticks and see what you like. So there's that side of it as well. But it's hugely important to find something. That we all need something. And sitting down on your phone, thumbing through Facebook or Instagram for hours every night, in my view, isn't that. Because as much as I like social media, it is kind of, it can just really numb you down to the core. I used to find Facebook incredibly frustrating, just for the fact that I'm like, why is this idiot popping up my feed? Why am I friends with you in the first place? And I'm quickly reminded, well, you left everybody into our lives when you were on the radio, and you just maxed out the friend requests on Facebook because you accepted everybody. So I just did a cull on Facebook of people I didn't really know. I brought it down from 5,000 to 500, 700, something like that, over a
Mm-hmm.
period of time. And even still, I'd be like, why is this idiot commenting about this? And then if you have some negative experience, even from that alone, and the fact that that comment F this, that's really annoying me.
Mm-hmm.
That's had an impact on you. So what I did was I unfollowed everybody. So all I see these days on Facebook is camera groups and Facebook groups.
Mm-hmm.
Or barbecue groups. So it's cameras and barbecue. That's all I see. If I want to see what Johnny is doing, I have to actively go to Johnny's profile and scroll through his stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that was a huge help,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's really, there's a huge underestimation on the effect that social media has on people's lives, who are not necessarily in that space, because some people do think that's how the world works.
Mm-hmm.
People are influenced by influencers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's the other side of the mental health thing. So that's why it is important to have another release. But I guess if you tie in the photography or the video side of it, you're like, I made this great video, but nobody's looking at it. I took this great photograph, 2 people liked it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's almost feeding it as well. So you should do it because you want to do it.
Exactly.
Not for the likes, not for the views, not for the subscribers or the followers. Like, if that happens, that's like an organic byproduct. That's where you put it.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't have to put it there. But then everybody wants validation in some shape or form. But first and foremost, do something because you want to do it, and only you want to do it. Doesn't matter what it is, but it is very important to keep the old mental health in check. It's hard to keep it in check.
I fully agree with you, and I think it's even harder now because there's so many different bombardment of different messages. I mean, I have a philosophy in my life, I had it for many, many years, which is, I decide who takes rent in my head. It's only rent. They're never going to be there, but I decide it. And if I want to evict them, I evict them, but I let them in the first place. And if you are bombarded with all these different messages, there's some of them that are going to stink. They're going to slip in, and you may not even twig it at the time, but it's there. And all of a sudden, something else will come, and that will trigger it as well. And photography is a big one, because people is all about the endorphin release, and oh, I got 100 likes in this image, I'm a better photographer. You're not a better photographer because you got 100 likes. It's just that you got a photograph that 100 people saw and they said they liked it.
Yeah.
Your own creative is for you. I mean, you make your videos because you enjoy making the videos. I make my videos because I enjoy it. I never make my videos for sounds harsh, for my audience. I make them for me. If my audience like it, then brilliant. But at the end of the day, I'm making it for me. Same with my photography. And I think that's where, having a creative outlet, you hit on something there a second ago, about it could be anything. It could be painting, it could be knitting. I think when we're growing up, the different things that we're exposed to, the more things we're exposed to, the better in regards to finding a hobby. Because I don't know about you, but I have a lot of friends now my age that don't have a hobby. They don't have something that they go off and do creatively for themselves or in their own thing, except for going to the pub on a Saturday to watch United lose and get pissed off because United are losing and take it so personally. The United doesn't give a damn about you. They don't care.
Yeah, they've got your money like
they're playing their game. You're a spectator, but you're invested in that. And I think that's what Facebook and all the social medias have become, is that spectator on other people's lives. I'm like you. I have it all turned off. The only thing I see is photography groups or photography podcast group, and people that I know through photography. That's it. Nothing else. And if I want to go see somebody who I met 10 years ago, I don't know why I'd want to go see it, but if I ever did want to go see, I'll go into their profile exactly the same as that. Mental health is really, really, really important. And it's great now that I think in the last 10 years that us as men are starting to understand that more, because we always kind of bottle things up and go, sure, I'd be grand. Sure, I'd be fine. Sure, I couldn't tell somebody how I was feeling about that. Well, guess what?
Yeah.
As the phrase goes, it's okay to not be okay. And I think, being creative is a fantastic outlet for it. So no, Vic, I fully agree with your comments on that. And thanks very much for, speaking so passionately in relation to it. Okay, I'm going to take my final break and I'll come back. I've got 3 quick fire questions that I ask every single guest, and I'm not going to let you off either. So I'm going to ask you the same ones. All right, so we'll be right back after this. If you're enjoying this episode of the Irish Photography Podcast, why not jump back and listen to the back catalogue we have of episodes, where you'll get some great insights from fantastic guests, gear reviews, lots of hints and tips, and above all else, keeping you company while you drive or relax. Thanks very much for listening. Please consider subscribing, leaving a review wherever you're listening to this podcast. Very welcome back to the final part of the Irish Photography Podcast. So, Vic, like I said, I got 3 questions to ask all my guests. And the first question I ask is, a funny photography story. So, what's yours, Vic Barry?
This is a tough one. A couple of years ago, we were in the north of Ireland, and I had a tiny little Osmo Pocket at the time, which was a handheld little camera. I was like vlogging the area. So we went out to the Carrick-a-Reel rope bridge. I was like, oh, this will be great vlog content. So at the time, my wife's leg was bust, so she couldn't go. And I don't know if you've been there or not, Darren.
I haven't, no.
Stunning. I mean, like there's landscape photo after landscape photo.
Yeah.
You could be on the ground, blind, blacked out, and you'd still manage to take a good photograph of that neck of the woods. So the descent down onto the rope bridge was very, very steep, and I was like, Jesus. And I had the 2 kids with me, like Cameron and Mia with me, and Mia was 4 or 5. And Cameron was about 8 or 9, 8 maybe. Got down anyway, and I went first. And as soon as I got onto the bridge, complete and utter meltdown, right?
Jelly legs.
Completely, because however high this thing is in the air, Carrick-a-Reel Pro Bridge, got across to the other side anyway. And the 2 kids I had no idea where they were. They could have fallen off, so, that was grand anyway. And I was just dreading coming back. And the kids could sense this, and I was like a demon on the other side. I was like, just stand there, don't move. I was stressed out. And it's an island that you walk onto, And
yeah.
So I was fine anyway. And as we were, you had to queue up either side to get on or to get back. So we walked around the island and we came back. And this time, I'd go last, so my son Cameron went first. No bother to him. He was jumping up and down in the middle of it, like happy out. And then Mia went. And as I was going across, I just started talking into the camera, but again, just started crumbling inside. I mean, I was shaking.
Wow.
Shaking. And all I hear is this guy shouting, "Will somebody come up to the child, please?" So I had my 4.5, 5-year-old daughter way out in the middle of the bridge. I'm barely African onto it, shaking. So I had to put on the dad. I had to put on the dad belt, then the dad outfit, and just race across and grab her, and she was fine. But it's funny when we came back and I edited the video and I put the video together. On the sides of this rope bridge, on we'll say it's a wooden rope bridge across, but on each side of these little planks of wood, there's this netting. It's like this very fine fishing net, cargo net.
Right.
But what I didn't see at the time is near the start of it, there's big holes in it. Now, I wouldn't fit through it, but a 4-year-old would have plunged to their death going through it. And it's only when I looked at that, like we can laugh about it now, but at the time I was like, Jesus Christ, what have you done?
Wow.
So I don't know, is that more funny or harrowing? But that definitely was just brutal.
Do you know what? It's actually, I don't know if it's funny or harrowing, because it's actually something that you probably didn't think of at the time, but then you look back and afterwards and you're like, Jesus Christ almighty, what was I thinking?
I was thinking, this is great content.
Yeah, exactly. What did the person that was going, would you look at the parent over there? There he is on his Mars bar talking away.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Good one. Okay. Next one is, what gear do you use now?
So if I'm out and about, Sony ZV-1 or maybe the Sony ZV-10, predominantly Sony ZV-1. Main studio camera that I use at the moment, when I say at the moment, permanently for a long, long time, is the Sony FX3.
That's only recently come out as well, is it?
It came out kind of was it March this year, and I picked it up a couple of weeks ago. Very hard camera to get, and there's a Sony G lenses 1.8, 20mm on that, and that's kind of the primary gear. Mics and stuff like that, I like the Rode stuff, and I think it sounds relatively decent. and there's a couple of Sigma lenses and stuff like that. I genuinely love the Sigma 16mm, the 1.4. Great
Nice.
little APS-C lens, works really, really well. A lot of my videos before the FX3, actually all my videos that were done in the studio space were shot on that. And then I have a Sigma 600mm as well, which was put onto the Sony A6600, which was the main studio cam before the FX3. And of course, with the crop factor in that Sigma is about an 849mm or something like that.
Nice.
So
Nice.
yeah, so that's predominantly it. But Sony FX3 is the main studio camera for the long future.
Yeah, I'd say so. All right, yeah, nice investment. But you know what? I mean, you've got some fantastic glass there as well, and Sigma glass is phenomenal. Sigma
That's
glass is
great.
great. Yeah,
Great value as well, actually, for huge value for money. Like,
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, and my third question is a thing called a VSP. It stands for Very Solid Product. Product you won't leave home without. You'd put your name to it if you could. What's yours?
iPhone.
Bang, simple. Can't argue with that, really, can I?
Without a doubt, it's something, you know. And what's the old cliche? The best camera is the one that you have on you every
Yeah,
day.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I have
No,
13 arriving, so
have you?
on Friday.
And did you have the
Yeah, yeah.
12?
I no, I didn't. I skipped the 12.
All
I
right,
have the
okay.
11 Pro, so I said, okay, that cinematic mode is like, oh yeah, I'm sure I'll use that for something.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
cinematic.
it was yeah, I was time to go for a new phone, so yeah.
Yeah, good
So
stuff.
iPhone.
Good stuff. Right. So that's it, man. Jeez, we're after getting through all our questions, and I really enjoyed it so far. And I say that, you know, it's something that I was expecting some interesting answers, but Vic, you've given me some excellent answers there, I suppose, really to the questions. So what's
Good
next for you,
stuff.
man? What's happening next now for you? What's coming up on the channel, or what's happening for you next?
Um, so I suppose we just really blazed through the 20K subs, 50,000 subscribers is on
The road to
the
50K. So I remember the road to
the
500. Now we're on the road to 50K.
yeah. So the 50K will take a little bit longer, but we're going to see, can we accelerate it? So I suppose it's like in the real world, it's obviously driving the teamwork brand on with video
Hmm.
and stuff like that. That doesn't change. I suppose from personal sense on YouTube, it's 50K on that. Video wise, there's a few GoPro videos, there's a few Sony videos on the way. Um, I've been planning out a couple of courses for a long time.
Very good.
So it's time to try and find time to record them,
Hmm.
and get them up in the likes of Skillshare or Udemy. I'm just looking at different platforms
Very good.
at the moment. I want to build out. I have victorbarry.com. I've had that for years and years and years. I haven't done anything with the site. It just redirects to the YouTube channel. But I have a small little self-fi store with LUTs and a few audio presets. So it might be nice to house all of them in one kind of single platform.
Nice.
So yeah, that's kind of it. I think, you know. I try and take each day as it comes, grateful for every day, and the opportunities that it brings, you know. And it's just keeping on getting better, you know. Like watching YouTube in my house is a disaster because why is Daddy watching tutorials? You know, why can't we watch more Mr. Beast? You know, why is Daddy watching color grading tutorials? Why is Daddy watching audio tutorials? So yeah, it's the keep learning thing always, because it's I'm not learning for the sake of learning. I'm learning because I enjoy it.
Yeah. It makes it easier
Um,
to learn then.
totally.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not like going back to school at all, you know.
No, of course. I mean, look, next week you'll be doing that course on colonic irrigation. I'd say you'll be absolutely fascinated by it. Not. I mean, if
Yeah,
if you like something, it's a lot easier to get engaged with it
yeah.
and learn more in relation to it as well. And where can people find you? So, what's all your handles?
VictorBarry.com, Vic Barry on Instagram, at Victor Barry on Twitter. Like, I used to be very engaged on Twitter, not so much anymore. Instagram, I'm more stories driven than post driven. But but the YouTube channel is probably the best spot to get hold of me, in any capacity, because that's the one that I'm kind of most active on. Twitter, I can go months without using Twitter, or I can go months and it's every 5 minutes, tap, 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 tap.
Mhm.
You know, hey, Peter, how's it going? You didn't respond to the last 500 tweets. You won't respond to this one either, I guess.
Just change your name to the 5 o'clock man. He'll remember you then. Vic, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Irish Photography Podcast. Thanks a million for coming on. I've loved hearing your story. I've loved, hearing all the nuggets of information in relation to the creative point of view. I'm really enjoying your YouTube channel, and what I'll do is I'll put all the details into the show notes as well, so people can find all of your social links and stuff like that. It's been a pleasure. I'd have to come down and have a look at your studio someday so you can actually show me some hints and tips that I can turn my ensuite here that I have into something a bit better. Yeah.
Absolutely. Darren, thanks for your time. Really enjoyed it. Thanks, dude.
Cheers, man. Thanks a million. Slán go fóill.
Hey guys, if you dig what you're hearing, why don't you jump over to iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Give us a 5-star rating and don't forget to share with your friends. With all that done, we'll see you next week, and remember, keep shooting.